Okay, hey again, everyone. Once again, it's Emma here at Function Point. I've got Mark with me, and thanks so much for joining in today. We're going to get the show started here with our first webinar in this new series, all about fast and furious finding in your system. So I'm just going to show us our quick agenda here, and then I'll pass things over to Mark. FYI, I am recording today's session, so if anyone wants to listen to this later or has a colleague you think you would like to have attended but they weren't able to, this session is recorded, and I'll post it probably later today or tomorrow. So for our agenda today, Mark's going to be taking us through the ins and outs of FP's find routines and show us a bit about how to do custom searches to almost build your own kind of reports out of the system. Mark, did I get that right? Anything else?
Yeah, you got it. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, yes. And thank you so much for being our presenter again in this new series.
No problem, no problem. Thanks for joining me.
Okay, well, why don't I go ahead and make you the presenter, and then you can start showing us what you had planned today. Oh, and I should have said, you were probably going to say it too, that I am here answering questions for anyone. So do be encouraged to type them into the GoToWebinar panel. I'll answer them, or we'll get Mark to answer them if we've got the time.
You got it. And you should be able to see my screen pretty shortly. Are you able to see my screen with the system open there, Emma?
I do, yeah, I see your demo system.
Okay, fantastic. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining in today. A few things I want to plug real quick before we jump into the meat of things. One is please remember to take a look at the What's New area. The What's New area is kind of new. So check it out. It's really cool. If you just hover over the question mark at the top right corner of the system, you'll see What's New, and that'll open up another tab on your browser. Here you're able to see information about product releases and enhancements. There'll be recordings and documentation and new things we're putting up that are available resources for you, like recordings of the webinars in case you happen to miss any, and just other things like new videos that we're creating and things like that. And then any kind of ongoing bug fix reporting that's going on. So you can see a list of any kind of bugs that you may have submitted or other people may have submitted that they found and where those are in the fixing process. So check out the What's New area. Another thing as well I want to mention is our LinkedIn group, the Business of Creative for Creative Agency Management. We have about 1,500 members right now, but we're really trying to get more in there and putting more content up all the time. So please check out the Business of Creative for Creative Agency Management, and you'll be happy that you did. I'm going to have blog posts up there myself pretty soon, hopefully the next couple of weeks. Probably going to gear towards financial workflow, as that's kind of a thing. As far as today's webinar, the topic that we're covering is, I want to say it's a simple topic, but it's so important because I'm talking to agencies all the time who are saying, I want to find a way to look at, this type of report. I want to find, where can I just see a list of this type of data? And oftentimes when I'll show them what can be done in Function Point's find routines, they seem to be kind of surprised by it. They weren't aware that you can do things like customize the data, and if you get creative with it, you can produce different types of reports and customize both PDF and exports that allows you to have a lot more flexibility. So there's a lot of importance to these find routines. They can really help you out, especially if maybe you have a report right now that's like a standardized report, one of the reports that's coming out of the report section or maybe from the jobs details page, and maybe it's giving you more data than you need, and you've been producing this report for a long time because it has that one column that has information that's relevant to you, but it has a whole bunch of other stuff that you sharing around the office, and you keep on telling people ignore all these columns, but just look at this one. Well, there's probably a find routine that can help you with that. A way that you can customize the data that is the result of your search and then produce it into a report. So we're going to be going over find routines, some of the tools that you can do within those, and then the resulting report, and then the reports that you can make from the results. As Emma said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the GoToWebinar question box in the GoToWebinar panel there. Any ones that we can get to during the webinar, we will. Any ones that we can't, we will follow up with an answer for you later on. I do expect this webinar to be pretty quick. I'm thinking I'm probably going to be done on content to share with you in about 30 minutes or maybe even less. And then any extra time will be for questions. I do have a couple questions that were sent to me actually before the webinar, so I'll address those as well. But without further ado, let's get started. So, I'm going to take you through a couple scenarios that I thought up that would be good examples for, using these find routines. And the first one I'm going to take you through is going to be really simple. I'm going to be looking at the companies area, and let's say that I need a list of companies, I need their address information. maybe I'm wanting to, use the data for some sort of mass mailing program. Maybe I'm wanting to import it into something, or use it in another program. So I need address information for maybe all of my clients. So I'm going to do a company find, and that brings me to a find page. Now, actually, one thing I want to mention is the scenarios I'm giving you are specific, because I like to talk about specific examples, specific scenarios that come up. But keep in mind that if you never see yourselves doing a find for companies to get their address information, that doesn't mean that what I'm about to show you is not relevant. It's just, these are examples I'm coming up with to show you these routines, but the things I'm doing, the actions I'm taking are relevant for a variety of different searches. But here I'm going to do a company find, and I'm just going to search based on company type of client. Keep it really simple. So I want to see all my clients, click find, and that produces the results of my search. Now here I'm seeing a standard list of data. I think this is the default list that we're seeing in the default columns. Company name, type, status, phone, fax, web. So if this information is not relevant to me, perhaps I need an export of the address information. What I can do is choose to manage these columns and then exclude and include the information that I want. So for example, I may not need the website. That's not relevant to me at this point. I don't need the fax number because they're pretty rare. People don't really have them much anymore. I'm going to take out the edit, but I need my address information. So I'm going to put in address 1. Maybe I'll leave out 2. I'm going to put the city, state, zip, and country. And then if I want to reorder these, then I can. So right now this looks okay. Address, city, state, zip, country, that's fine. But maybe I want the status to the left of type. So I'm going to restructure these. Also, if I have any custom fields that I've created myself, then I can choose to include those custom fields as well, which is a very, very powerful thing. If you're creating custom fields, they could be drop-downs, date fields, they could be open text areas, and you can then search and then report on these using the custom fields. So I'll save that, and that is then going to give me the information that I asked for. From here, I can choose to select print and export this into a PDF. It's just going to give me a PDF of the data that I had on the screen in that structure. I can also choose to export the data to a CSV format. And it's going to ask me, and this is somewhat new, do you want to export the current view or export all the data? So previously, if you hit export, it was giving you everything, significantly more data than was on screen. Now you have the option of exporting just the current view, which will give you an export of just the data that you're looking at. I'm going to show you another example of that in just a bit. I think I saw a question come in there. Emma, is there a question that we can answer?
Oh, hey, Mark. No, we're okay for now. Thanks for checking in. Celine, our friend, was just having some lag issues, so she's going to try to log out and log back in. I didn't hear from anyone else, so I'm thinking it was just affecting her, so we regret that's happening. But hopefully everyone else is seeing where you're at in real time there.
If anybody else is experiencing lag, so my actions are not catching up to my words, then just let us know via the question panel, and then what I'll do is I'll probably stop sharing my screen, restart it, not restart the whole program, but just kind of pause and then play, and then that usually can fix up any kind of lag issues. The next example we're going to look at is more common, where we're doing a company find, and I want to see all the companies that are, company find. We're going to do a job find, and I want to see maybe all the jobs that are due within a certain time period. So I'm going to do a job find, and there's a couple different things that I'm going to do with that data once I get there. But I'm always surprised at how few people know about the search tools that are available to you here. They are listed off to the side here, but I know oftentimes you're kind of working away, and it's not quite jumping out at you. But there's a lot of neat things that you can do. There's some really useful things, like for example, date ranges that I use all the time, both in examples to clients and also in our own internal system. But for example, values being between A and B. So when we have something like a date field, that's really useful. If I want to see all the jobs that are due between today and the next 6 weeks, I can type in that information, leave the field that gives me that date span. Now you'll notice that I like to use short forms. If I typed in 3 months ago to 2 months, 3 weeks, 4 days, and 72 hours from now, it's going to pick up pretty much anything you can think of, as long as you spell it correctly. But of course, you don't have to type in that kind of casual information. I can put my cursor into the field, and maybe click on the date here, drop in 3 dots, and then say November 30th, and it'll fill that in for me. So it's pretty forgiving, but of course, if I do misspell it, or if I put in September 1, I don't think it takes, oh, okay, it does, so it'll take the T. But you get what I'm saying. If you spell something wrong, it's not going to give you the information. There's other neat things that we can do that are pretty easy to use, greater than and less than. So, for example, one thing I would often do in order to look at jobs that were open in our internal system after a certain point is, instead of using a creation date, sometimes I'd use a job number. And I had a few different reasons for that I won't get into now. But for example, I might say, well, I want to see all jobs where the number is greater than 3,000. And if I do a find, it's going to show me every job where the number is greater than 3,000. It also works with dates. If I say, I want to see every job where the due date is greater than today. So everything due, from today forward. Or I want to see everything that is less than, December 31st, for example. And everything due before the end of the year. So there's a lot of really neat things that you can do with these, and there's actually some more advanced ones that are somewhat new. That if you look at, they're pretty easy to use. Search for all the terms A plus B. So if you type in one word and then a plus symbol and then another word, everything that contains those two words. Or if you're wanting to make sure that a certain value is empty or a certain value is filled, there's a lot of neat things you can do with this. But let's look at an example. And the example I'm going to give is related to expenses. I find this one comes up all the time, so I'm going to relate it to expenses. Again, if maybe you don't run your expenses at a function point, or it's not really something that comes up all that often, don't worry about the specifics of what I'm showing you. It's more so the techniques that I'm using that are important here. But in the example I'm going to give, I want to do a job find, and I want the resulting list to show me, what are all the jobs that I have expenses purchased for, and have I billed for those expenses? And if so, have I billed all of the value or just some of it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a job find here, and I'm going to say, show me everything due between today and the next 6 weeks. And I want to see everything that is either open or in production or with the client. Now, when you have a multi-select feature like this, you used to need to hold control and select it that way. Now you can just click them, and it will add and subtract as you need. So open with the client or in production. Click find, and that produces the results of my search. So that's showing me every single job that is open in production with the client that is due within the next 6 weeks. I'm going to show you some really cool stuff that we can do with this data from here. Before I do that, any questions come in at all that I can answer?
Oh, hey, Mark. Yeah, thanks for checking in. Could you just for us, that one you did about the show all the find all the jobs that are coming up before the end of the year, that was a popular one. Can you show that one more time for us, please?
Yeah, for sure. So, what I'm doing there is I'm just using a less than value, sorry, not less than or equal to, less than. In fact, less than or equal to might be relevant. But let's use less than for now. So I want to see, everything that is due, less than December 31st. So, less than symbol December 31st. Click find, and that produces the result. So here are all the jobs that are due before December 31st of this year. Now, some of these are closed and invoiced. If I wanted to narrow it down further, I, of course, would have used statuses. Maybe I have some jobs that are due on the 31st. So what I would do in that case is I would say less than or equals to December 31st. So any job due on the 31st or earlier that has a status of open. And click find. And this is everything that is due on the 31st. And actually, there was one. So everything that's due on the 31st or before the 31st.
That's excellent. Thank you, Mark. And I'm really glad you've been pointing out, because something I love these find screens, but I find with some of the clients I work with, they'll get stuck with them because they're not leaving the field, and that's so important. And I'm really glad you've been pointing that out, that you put in those parameters and then make sure you sort of give the system a chance to fill in the blanks as needed, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually, I find that is good, just kind of web experience advice. It's not always necessary, but I just typically recommend doing it. If you're filling in a form somewhere, whether it's in function point or somewhere else, I just get in the habit of leaving fields before I hit enter or find or submit or whatever it is. it just makes me more comfortable. But I mean, it's not always necessary, but I just like to do it, especially if, let's say, I spell something wrong. So if I type in, NORV1 to November 30th, if I leave the field, it's going to say, no, sorry, that does not exist. If I click find, it's giving me everything. Actually, that might actually have worked. But I think it was just giving me everything that's open there. But the point is that it's, if I leave the field to November 30th, it's going to say, sorry, turn it red. This is not a relevant value. So I recommend leaving the field, before you click submit. Another thing I want to mention really quickly too is sometimes I see people putting in values here and then clicking find active. There's a button down at the bottom that says find active. That is relating to the job statuses. So if I put in some statuses here, open and on hold, there's no point in clicking find active because find active is relating to the statuses. If I click find active, it's automatically producing everything that is considered active in the system. So it's actually ignoring what you just put in. Find active is for when you don't want to have to enter anything. If I just want to see a list of all my active jobs, I would do a job find and just select find active, and it's going to show me everything that's considered active in the system. So it's a bit of a shortcut. If you're wanting to include your own statuses, then enter your values. Find jobs is find based on what I've put in. Find active is find the active jobs, and use the date parameters I've entered as well. So I'm going to pull up that list again, today to 6 weeks from now, that is open or in production with the client. Click find, and that produces the results of your search. So that gives us 22 jobs. That is the result. Now here's a standard default view. So this is, if you're a brand new user to Function Point, or you've never managed your columns before, you've never changed anything, this is what you're going to find. Now, one thing I want to mention is that up in the top left corner, there's a default view and an editable list view. This editable list view is exclusive to the jobs module. You're not going to find it anywhere else. The default view is where you're able to customize the columns. The editable list view, the columns here are not customizable. They're set because some columns some values you can come in here and change, and others you cannot. The due date and the status, and you can come in here and adjust these as you wish. You notice that the Manage Columns button is grayed out because it's not available in the Editable List view. Switch to Default View to Manage Columns. So switch back to the default view. But the Editable List view is very useful. If you need to go in and change a bunch of job statuses, or you just want to enter a comment about it, then you can come in here into the Editable List and quickly do that. Let's go back to the default view here. So what we're seeing here again is a default column structure where it's giving us the name of the job, the type, status, due date, and then some dollar values, estimated, actual, variance, and invoice. Now, in the example that I'm going to give you, and I get this a lot, people are often asking me, how can I see an overview of all the jobs and what their expenses situation is? What's the value of the expenses we've purchased? How much have we built with the client? What's the post markup value? And I want a report that shows all that to me. Well, there isn't really a standard report that's going to give that to you. So what you can do is a job find and then choose to manage the columns. Now, you're going to see the amount of flexibility here, and you'll be able to put together all the different things that you can do. But in this example, I want expense-related financial data. So first I'm going to take out the fields I don't need. I'm going to take out edit. I don't need that. I'm going to leave type and status. Actually, let's take out type. Let's take out AE as well, and office. But I want the company, I want the due date, I don't need the project, and I don't need any of these standard financials. They're too broad. Total estimate, total actual, total variance. I want expense-related data. So I'm going to take all that out. I'm then going to select the advanced option. So I'm going to choose the advanced fields. Now, depending on the module you're in, you might find different options here. When we did a company find module, there was the option to choose the custom fields. Using the job find module, there's the option to choose advanced fields. And you'll see that throughout the system. There's different options depending on where you are. Using the advanced fields, I'm going to choose to see my estimated external expense amount. I then want to see my actual external expense cost. Notice I have IS, IE, EE. IS is internal service, IE is internal expense, EE is external expense. I want to see my estimated external expense. I want to see my actual external expense cost and my actual external expense dollars. Now the dollars is referring to the post markup value. And you know what, as I was doing some prep work for this webinar, I started thinking to myself, I'm not actually a fan of this term. It doesn't really relate to what we often refer to as this value. So just a heads up to everybody, I am going to ask if we can get that changed to the word actuals, because it's more common with the terminology in the system. But that is what it's referring to, actual external expense cost. What did the expense cost us? Actual external expense dollars, what are we charging the client for it? Now those values might be different unless you mark up your expenses, in which case the dollars value will be higher. I then want to see the invoiced external expense amount. How much have we invoiced for these expenses? And I'm going to take a look at the order. So to the left, I want estimated external expenses. I then want cost, dollars, and invoice. So that structure looks pretty good. Let's maybe move the due date beside the job name. Once I'm happy with what I have here, I'll choose to save the columns. I now have my custom information in the order that I've specified. Before we look into this screen and the details on it, I just want to mention, if I move away from the screen, if I go somewhere else in the system, I can get back to the list that I was just on by clicking on the module header. If I click on the module header, it will repeat the last search that I did. It's a really common question I get from new users often. If you click on the column header and you're a brand new user, the default is find all, show me everything. So sometimes people will get used to clicking on the module header and seeing a list of everything. And then they've been using the system for a couple of weeks, and they do a find and they do a custom search, and then they go away and then they click the header and it brings them back to their custom search, and they can't figure out how to get to all jobs again. So I just want to repeat that clicking on the module header repeats whatever the last search was that you did. Notice that the managed columns, my custom columns, are preserved. So whatever I have as my columns is going to be shown to me each time I do that find. If I want to change it, I would need to go back into managed columns and customize the data that I'm seeing there. But what this is now showing me is the name of the job, the due date, the status. I can then see the estimated external expense. Notice that because there isn't enough screen real estate to show the entire name, it's cutting it off. If you hover over it, it'll show you the full name. But this is the estimated external expense. This is the actual external expense cost. So these are all the cases where we've purchased expenses, and this is what it cost us. I can then see the actual external expense dollars. Again, this is referring to the post markup value. So looking at this job here, for example, we estimated $1,800 as the total billable value of expenses. We purchased $1,500 worth of expenses. We marked it up to $1,800. We have not invoiced the client for any value there. So that's showing me then how much we've invoiced for those external expenses. So I want to sort this. I'm seeing a lot of jobs where I don't have any external expenses, either in the actuals and in some case even estimated. So I'm going to sort this by, let's say, estimated external expense. So I now have them sorted by estimated external expense. I'm then going to subsort by actual external expense billable value. So there isn't much change there, but I can sort that as well. This resulting list, I can then choose to print this, and the PDF will have totals. So the PDF is giving me a total for everything down here. So I can see, the actual external expense dollars being the post markup value is $25,937. We've only invoiced $7,500. So here's another common question is, well, how can I see the difference? Now in this case, we have gone in and we've, managed the columns, and we've put in a bunch of custom columns here and a custom sort and structure, and we've produced this custom report. But the system doesn't have the capability to give you the difference of each column on demand. Of course, it would be awesome, and like many things, it is something that will be addressed in the future at some point when there's a better way to do on-screen custom reporting on the fly. But currently, that is not available. So I have these two values: actual external expense post markup value and what we've invoiced. I want to see the difference between these values, and I just want to do that right now. I don't want to have to go to some other report. I just want to do it right from here. So what we would do, I mean, of course, you could always pull out your trusty calculator, but if you have a whole bunch of different things that you want to compare, is you can choose to export the data. Now I'm going to export the current view. That's going to give me a CSV file. I'm going to open that in Excel. And here is the current view. And then here it's really simple. You know, I would just drop in a calculation here. Oops, sorry about that. I believe that I need to put in some brackets. I'm not that great with Excel. But there's my value. And then, of course, I would the sum of this value, and then, of course, I would produce the difference. So, you know, I agree with probably what many of you are thinking. It's not the best solution because it's not a custom report you're doing on screen, but it is a way of getting the data. So, you know, if you're producing these custom lists and you're putting in values that you want and you want to compare them, there may not be a report, you know, in the system for you to do that. But it's easy to export the current view to a CSV, run a quick you know, formula on that, and then get the value that you're looking for. Get rid of that guy. I'm going to give another example. The next example is actually going to stick with the theme of expenses. We're going to do an expense find, and it's going to we're going to look at this as almost like a story. So a person is, you know, wanting to see all the jobs that they have expenses, you know, all the open jobs in the next 6 weeks and what the expense values are and what we've invoiced for them, and that's what this report here is showing me. Maybe the next step is, well, I want to see all the expenses, but I want to see every expense purchased in the last couple months, and I want to see, you know, if those expenses have been billed, because we might have differences. You know, I have, you know, $1,800 here in expenses on this job, but I've only invoiced for $993. This $1,800 might be made up of multiple purchases, and I want to know which ones of those have we billed and which ones have we not. I want a more specific data set relating to what we're looking at here. So the next thing I'm going to do is an expense find. Before we go into that, Emma, any questions that I can answer?
Oh, hey, Mark. Yes, could I trouble you to just show us the drag and drop when you're in the manage columns view again, just how you drag and drop the column order for us, please?
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a look at that in the, we'll do the expense find, and then we'll take a look at that. I'll show the manage columns kind of dragging and dropping. One thing I want to mention as well is that I do have a couple questions in my list around doing timesheet finds for specifics around pay time off, sick time, vacation time, things like that, and then also, you know, just a timesheet find for, you know, all the time spent in a month for a certain client. So those are some questions that came in, very good ones, and I am going to address those as soon as we're done this expenses item in the next couple minutes, and then we'll take a look at some of the timesheet finds and reporting. But just as a quick example, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but again, I want to see the specifics that is making up the data that we're looking at, you know, the specific expenses that have been purchased. So I'm going to do an expense find, and I'm going to use some of the things we've already looked at. So I'm going to look at expense date. Now, expense date and creation date are two different things. I might create an expense today that I put an expense date for the end of the month. The expense date is what you enter on the screen. The creation date is what the system tags as the day that you actually created it. But I'm going to look at expense date. I'm going to say, you know, show me everything from, well, let's just use November 1 until today. And then I can narrow this down by any other information. I can narrow it down by the suppliers. I could, you know, narrow it down by, you know, the jobs or the clients that they were for, a variety of other things. But I'm just going to say all the expenses in November. Here's the resulting list. So I'm seeing, you know, the company, the job, the service group, the type of expense, the supplier, and the billable value. Well, I want to know what was the cost value. I want to know how much of it have we invoiced and is it billed or not. So I'm going to choose to manage the columns. I'm going to take out what I don't need. So I want supplier and I want type. I want company. I don't need project. You know, I don't need the job number either. But I do want to see the actual total cost, so what we paid for the expense. I want to see the billable value, which is already there. I want to see the billed, you know, value. Now in this case, it's not showing me the value of what's been billed. It's showing me whether or not it has been billed, and I'll show you that. And if it has, I want to see the amount of that invoice. Now let's structure these in a way that makes sense. So looking down at the bottom here, I want to see actual total cost as the farthest left financial value. So I'm going to drag that over. I want to see the build icon, let's say farthest to the right. And then I'm going to have invoiced amount and billable there. So in order to answer the question around reordering, I'm simply just clicking the field header and just moving it wherever I want it to show up. The little blue line shows you where it was. And then if I want to put it back to where it was, I just take it back over and drop it in. Click Save Columns. And there we are. Actually, you know what? There's one other column I want to add in there that I forgot. I want to add in status. I'm going to put status. I wanted it to the far right, so that's perfect. Save those columns. So here I can see that for all the expenses in November, this is the cost value of each of the expenses. This is the billable value, so the post-markup billable value. And we have a photography expense that we purchased from our supplier, Streamline Interactive. It was for a job called Home Depot Rewards website, and it was for our client, Home Depot. I can see that it cost us $2,000. The billable value is $2,500. We invoiced them $2,500, and the item is considered billed. Now, these two aren't mutually exclusive. So I might have a expense for where the billable value is $3,600, but maybe I'm going to eat the markup, and I'm going to bill them just the $3,000. That's going to be marked as billed, but I might only have billed them $3,000, so we'll have a variance between those amounts. It's another example where you might want to export the data and run a formula in order to see what is the difference between what we should be billing and what we're actually billing on these expenses. Now the build is showing me whether or not it has been billed. The status is showing me whether or not it has been exported. Typically, if you're using an integrated accounting system with this program, if something is exported, you can consider it as paid. So if something is exported to accounting, it is now a bill to be paid in accounting. Whatever your bill payment process is, upon receipt, net 30, net 90, net whenever I feel like it. It's totally your business. But as far as function point is concerned, if something has been exported, then you consider it a paid invoices, or sorry, a paid bill as far as function point is concerned. But that is an example of where we're wanting to see more detail. So we did a job find, and we looked at expense financial data. But I wanted to know what were the actual expenses and how much of them have we billed for this month. So I did an expense find, and I chose to manage those columns. And maybe in this case, I just want to see some simple totals. So I'll click Print, produce that PDF, and it's going to give me totals for the financials. So there we are on, doing some of these custom searches and custom finds, and then managing the columns, exporting the data, printing the data. I chose some examples today that have come up and I thought are good examples of creative uses of these managed columns options. But there's so much that you can do with this. So often I find myself, talking with clients that are using Function Point and them giving me an example of a report they're trying to produce. We'll spend a bit of time going through some of the standardized reports, not find what they're looking for, and then use a custom search and a managed columns option to get them as close as we can, and then maybe a little bit of Excel manipulation, and then voila, there are reports available for them. I find that as so often as a solution. So please remember that the managed columns option is there. Play around with it, get creative. There's a lot of cool things you can do. The next thing I'm going to do is show some timesheet find information. I'm going to answer a couple specific questions that came in before the webinar, and then any others that are coming in as well. In fact, I should check in. Any questions that I can answer at this time?
Hey, Mark. No, we are good as gold, thank you. But everyone do be encouraged to type your questions away, and we'll get Mark to help.
Okay, sounds good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a timesheet find. Now the question that came in is, how can I see all the timesheets in a certain month or in a certain time period for a specific client? So what I might do is I might do a timesheet find, and I want to see everything for my client's Great Atlantic Insurance. Now here's the thing, company name. Notice that it is an open text field and not a specific item select field. And there's a few reasons for that. And one is that we might have multiple Great Atlantics. We have some clients where they're working with, I'm just going to throw out a generic example. Let's say McDonald's. They're working with McDonald's Co-op, but there are maybe 30 different locations, and they use each location as a company. and it might be McDonald's location 1 or McDonald's Vancouver location or something like that. So they have each of those as a company, but if they do a find or search, they can just type in the word McDonald's, and it's going to give them all the data for every McDonald's entity in the system. So that's why it's just an open text field. But I want to see all the timesheets for my client, Great Atlantic, and I want to see all the timesheets from, let's say, October 1 until today. Now, I can narrow this down by a variety of other values. I can narrow this down by whether or not those timesheets have been billed or to a specific service line item, or a variety of other things. But in this case, I'm going to say, show me all my timesheets for Great Atlantic Insurance within a specific time period. That is the result of my search. And then right away I can see, okay, well, I have the company and the service and the description of these start and end fields. Start and end fields refer to the start and end time. So if we happen to be tracking the specific time of day, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., 2 hours, that type of thing, then that'll show, sorry, 3 hours, simple math a little off there, and that will show here. But we don't track that, and most agencies that use function point don't either. So I'm going to, right away, I'm just going to select a manage columns. I'm going to take those out because I don't need those there, and then save that. I can produce a PDF report on this, and it's going to give me a total, in this case, in that time. We've done a lot of time. So, almost 700 hours in this month and a half for our client, Great Atlantic Insurance. Now, let's say that I want to produce a report to them. I want to give it to them, but maybe I don't want to include the descriptions. Maybe we badmouth them in the description field, so I don't want to have that showing to them. So I'm going to go manage columns. I'm just going to take out the description field. And then put in anything else. The job name, I want the job name for them to see that. Job is referring to the number, so I'm going to put the job name in there. I don't need the edit field. I don't need the posted field either. Maybe the service group isn't relevant to the client, but maybe the service is. And then, financial values, the billing rate and the cost rate and the gross profit and these values. Well, I don't want our client to see that, so I'm going to leave those out. And I'm going to take the job name. I'm going to put it over beside the job number. I'm going to put the company to the left of the job, and I'm going to put the date beside the service. Save those columns. Hit print. And now I have a nice report. One thing I should have mentioned as well is, of course, I can custom sort this data by any value. So maybe I want it sorted by job name first, and then I want it sorted by date. So select job and then date. It's now sorted by those two values. Select print, and that will produce the PDF in the sort order that you specified. You can always, of course, again, export the data, and there's also a standardized report you can produce from here as well. In this case, it's going to open up in Excel. And here's a report that's giving us totals by job. So that's how we can do a find for a specific client for a certain time span, all the time that we spent for them within that time span. There was also another question around how can I do a find for all the time that was spent on sick or vacation within a time span. And it's really similar. So I would just do a timesheet find, and I'd say, well, I want to look at all the time spent, let's say, in sick time for, let's say, this year. So January 1 to today. I don't think in my system I track all that much because it is just an example, but we'll have some in there. Oh, there we are. So there's one for Emma, one for me, one for Sarah. 8 hours for each of them, except for Sarah took 7.5, and that is a sick day. Now that's just really simple, and I mean that time is tracked just by choosing in my example our in-house job and selecting sick. And maybe I was, sick yesterday. I was 8 hours in there. Submit that. That's my sick time track. Now, if you want to be a bit more specific with it, you can use what we call a PTO task. Now, a PTO task is something that we thought up for our own internal use. Let me give you an example. I created one for this webinar after I got that question. But if you look at my tasks and to-dos, I have a task here called PTO vacation. Now, it's due on the 31st of December, which means that it's due on the last day of the year, which means that it's always going to be in the bottom of my list. If I'm a designer, this isn't going to get in my way. It's up at the top because I don't have too many tasks. It also happens to be close to the end of the year. But what this is showing me is that I have 80 hours budgeted to me for the year in vacation time. So my vacation task has 80 hours, 40 hours a week, 2 weeks, 80 total hours. I have 32 actual hours against it so far. So I've put in 32 hours of vacation time of my 80 hours that's available to me in the year. What this allows you to do is it allows you to put the information in front of your staff. Your staff are going to know how much vacation time they have, how much they've used, and you're also going to be able to see that. When they go on vacation, they simply just choose to select this task. Maybe I'm going to drop it in. I was on vacation on Friday for 8 hours and submit that. And that's my vacation time tracked, and I'm now up to 40. So that's how you can track that if you want to be a little bit more specific about it. So that's something I often recommend for tracking PTO. And you can do the same thing for a sick task. So if somebody gets 5, 6 days, sick days a year, and then you would have a task with a budgeted amount of hours of 40, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 40 hours. 5 days of the year, I should say, 40 hours available to them, and they can track their sick time to that task as they need. Emma, any questions on that or anything else that we've covered today?
Oh, hey, Mark. No, I haven't had any further questions about that, but I really thank you for showing that. And thanks to the client who sent those in ahead of time, and hopefully those got answered. Of course, if anyone thinks of anything after the session, we're happy to get those messages. If there's something you missed or something you thought of once we ended, we're still happy to take those questions in via email.
Awesome. Well, that's all the content I have planned for today. I do appreciate everybody joining in. Just kind of a quick, vocal recap. I mean, again, some of this seems pretty simple, and to be honest, it is. It's not really that difficult kind of thing to be using these search tips and whatnot, but it is so useful. I can't stress it enough. So, the next time you find yourself stuck, you're trying to, get a report, you're trying to get some data in a certain order, play around with defines, play around with those managed columns options, and also keep in mind that you may not always have the option to search by every field that's available to you. So, if you don't find a value on this screen, it doesn't mean that that value is not going to exist in the resulting search. So, a good example of that is, some of the financial data. You can see some pretty advanced financials on that list of jobs, but you can't search by them. You can't search for jobs based on a internal service cost range, for example, but that value is there. So don't always judge what you're going to find on the resulting list based on the fields available to you on the find screen, because there's oftentimes a lot more information that's available once you get that list. So play around with it, get creative. There's lots of cool things that you can do. And if you do have any more questions about this, please feel free to send them our way, and we'll be happy to answer them the best we can. Please join in for our webinar next week. And I feel terrible. I've been racking my brain for the last couple of minutes trying to think of what it is.
Mark.
I can't remember.
I'm terribly disappointed. No, I have no idea either. No, I'm just kidding. It's all about tracking time. So you have come up with, and I know I've passed on good advice to our clients from you based on your vast amount of experience with this and getting teams to track time and why it's so important and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for jogging my memory there. Sorry about that.
That's what I do.
But yeah, check it out. Please join in the webinar next week. Again, it's another one of those topics where it seems pretty simple, but it's so important, and there are actually some really good tips that you can get. I might even get into some cultural stuff. We work with a lot of agencies that are smaller agencies, and something we hear all the time is, we have a small team. We've been working together for a handful of years now. We've never tracked time before, but it's starting to become necessary. My team doesn't understand it, or they think that it's a case where we're trying to put a specific value on the time they spent instead of the value on the creative. There's some cultural roadblocks. So I'll probably talk about some cultural stuff and just how you can maybe persuade your team and explain and communicate to them the importance of tracking their time. We've had some success with agencies in the past around helping their team to understand why it's so important. So I'll talk about the system. I'll probably talk about some cultural stuff as well. And then if you have any questions before during or after, again, please feel free to send them our way.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Mark. As always, like I said, the recording will be posted up probably tomorrow or later today, and then we'll be doing this all again next week. So hopefully everyone will be able to join us then.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Emma. Thanks, everyone that joined in today, and I will talk to you all next week.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Take care. Bye.